I'm Jim Ogle, Executive Director of Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area, and I want to say hello to everyone who's joined me to share their memories and express how much Cheryl Collins has meant to them. And I'd like to start out by asking Diana Starsinik Dean to share a little bit about her relationship over the past couple of years with Cheryl. Diana?
Thank you, Jim. I'm Diana Starsinik Dean. I'm with the Franklin County Historical Society. I know that I probably knew Cheryl for the least amount of time of everyone who's here. But when I took my role as executive director in 2018, I quickly realized I desperately needed a mentor. And I reached out to Jim Ogle at Freedom's Frontier and said, I need someone. And without batting an eye, Jim says, I know exactly who you need. And since then, Cheryl and I connected almost monthly. And then when the pandemic started, every other month. But we had a really, really difficult leadership transition. And she kept me moving one foot in front of the other. She commiserated when I was whining. She listened to me complain about my board members and also try to figure out how to work with them. She helped me just sort of navigate how to be a leader to my staff when we were dealing with difficult things. She cheered for us. Sorry.
It's quite all right.
I was really hurt and sad when she passed away. So I'm so glad for the time I had with her.
Diana, thank you very much. I know that your sentiments certainly helped fill in a hole on the variety of things that Cheryl's done to assist people throughout the heritage area. Thank you for making time today. I want to open it up now. If someone else would like to say something, please unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
I think I will go next, if that's okay.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm Steve Novak. I'm the director of the Douglas County Historical Society in Lawrence. And Cheryl was just such a tremendous colleague. I met her through Freedom's Frontier about 10 years ago when I first moved out here, and I didn't know anything about working in a history museum. My background was in art museums, and Cheryl was really there to provide advice. She was, really quick to strike up a relationship and kind of lend a friendly hand whenever it was needed. She was someone you could always contact if you needed a little advice about something, or needed a perspective, or to how to understand something, how to understand how something is supposed to work, as opposed to how it might be stumbling along in your organization. And she became a really helpful kind of way to compare notes, understand how things work in Riley County, so that maybe I could understand how we could fix things in Douglas County. There was a nice parallel between our positions, and the perspective that she provided for me really helped me understand how a county historical society works, what's important about a public history museum, and her advice and her guidance is really something that we will miss here in Douglas County, and that I'm going to miss personally.
Thank you so very much, Steve. We appreciate your memories of working with Cheryl, and between the two of you, you are the sum total of the partner advisory group chairs along the way. So very much appreciated. Again,
Was another way she provided leadership and guidance for me. You know, I followed her example as a chair of that committee.
excellent. Thank you, Steve. Would someone else like to share their memories of Cheryl?
So this is Marcia Roselle. I'm with Visit Manhattan here in Manhattan, Kansas, the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. It's a division, tourism is a division of the chamber. And, you know, I started in this role 13 years ago, and Cheryl was right there from the very beginning. She was a rock and a steady person in our community, knew the history. It is such a terrible loss for our community, the amount of knowledge that she had just right off the top of her head. But I wanted to share just a couple of fun memories I have of Cheryl, specifically with Freedom's Frontier. You know, I had the privilege and the pleasure of traveling with her for many of the partner meetings, and we'd go to the very remotest places, and the whole way there she'd be telling me about how there was links and connections. And the famous things that I always remember her talking about was the threads, right? The threads of how things weaved between all of our organizations across the Freedom's Frontier heritage area, and how one, you know, somebody was related, or a marriage, or a sister, or whatever, of a person in a different community. And those were the stories I'll treasure. I wish I had her memory, because like I said, she knew that stuff off the top of her head, and I don't have that skill. But I remember going, we were headed down to Baxter Springs, and from here in Manhattan, that was quite a distance for us to drive. And so we went the night before and got a hotel room and shared it, and just had a great evening. But on the way to that hotel, and I don't even remember where we stayed, it had been after work, and we were just chatting away, and we were on the highway. I was driving. As some of you know, Cheryl's sense of directions was a little always off, and my sense of directions was good, but she knew the stories. Anyway, we're just talking along, and all of a sudden I see flashing lights right in the back of we're pulled over, and I'm thinking, oh my God, please don't tell my boss. So, you know, we were able to talk our way out of that ticket. But yeah, and then another time we went up, it was way up in the corner of Missouri. I don't remember the community, but I just remember, you know, she knew the history of what the people had gone through to restore some of those buildings up there. And it was the first time you guys had unveiled the big, that Michael had done the big display, and it just filled that room. And it was just amazing how she knew all the stories that were on that display. So it is, like I said, a hard loss for me, as a friend, as a mentor, as, you know, just an incredible person in our community.
Marcia, I was just thinking 13 years is a long time to have a relationship in the context you did. And then thinking about the fact that with 33 years as executive director and 40 years at Riley County Historical Society, even you are a newcomer.
Right,
Cheryl,
right.
in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you very much. Who else would like to talk today?
Well, I'll go.
Hi, Alexa.
Hi. Sorry, I was a little late. There was another meeting virtual that went over just a little bit, but Alexis with my Happy Stagecoach Stop and Farm, and Cheryl's always been that steady presence in not only the museum field, but the tourism field. She is very inspiring. She just loves Kansas so much. And when I worked for the Historical Society for a couple of years, and that's where I first met her in the early 2000s. And then when I came back to Mahaffey and started reestablishing the contacts, she was with Freedom's Frontier before it was designated as a National Heritage Area. So it was great to see her steady leadership with that. And just like Marcia mentioned, she always had those connections, or how I frame those to get people excited about history. I call them fun facts, because she always had a way of just connecting people to, maybe it was just one thing about that story, like the family or a particular quilt or a particular place. And she always had a way of just inspiring those connections through that. And one of the things that she really inspired me to do was get to know more about tourism. And being from the history field, you always ask yourself, well, people just want to come here because we think it's cool. No, not everyone thinks history is cool. And she really came with that tourism perspective and was able to kind of bridge some of those gaps on how museums and tourism have so many things in common, but yet so far apart on common ways of communicating things. And through her leadership with tourism through Manhattan and being on the governor's tourism board, she has just always been very inspiring and will continue to be inspiring, and she didn't hesitate to ask. She said, well, just go up and ask that person, just invite them places. And she emulated that. And she was always at Kansas Museums Association, encouraging staff, not only from Raleigh County, but from others, to get those, to keep learning and to find those stories about not only what interests you, but how they tie to Kansas in the broader picture. So she's always been just one of those energetic, go-getting, this is what I find interesting, but she had a way of absorbing what you find interesting too. And that's what I really appreciate about her. And hopefully we can continue to emulate that, because, tourism people and museum people have a lot in common. And through her leadership, she saw Bridget one day at, I can't remember what, but she just invited Bridget to the Kansas Museums Association conference in 2018 or 19, I can't remember which. And, it just never dawned on me just to ask tourism people to come to the Museums Association conference. And so through that inspiration, she's furthering those connections that will continue to this day. And because of that, Bridget and members from the Tourism Association of Kansas are going to be presenting at the KMA conference in Lawrence. And that's just going to be a great, unique opportunity to continue how we can work together, because all of us have those common challenges, but it's an opportunity to help people understand the nuances of each industry too. So I will forever be grateful for her on that.
Thank you, Alexis. I so appreciate those thoughts. You talk about things that are disparate. History and tourism, we don't always overlap. I know one of our colleagues, Lana Smith of the Westport Historical Society, that's the 1855 Harris Kearney House in Kansas City. One of the things that was really prevalent at the start of Freedom's Frontier, as I understand it, was the Missouri folks were on one side, and the Kansas folks were on the other. And though today we're able to share the same tables when we get together, if we ever get together again, it feels like. But Alana shared with me how she knew Cheryl from the mid to late 70s when they both worked at the Manhattan Country Club, and how the two of them, for 5 years while they were going to school, Cheryl was did table service, and Alana was a cocktail waitress. She said that's when they began the relationship. Both of them then go into telling the stories of our past history, and how very important it was to Lana that she always found Cheryl to be the person you could reach across the border and talk to and never have her even kiddingly put you down about, oh, you're from Missouri, I'm not going to talk to you, kind of thing. So just a tremendous inviting connector for these stories. And I dare say the reason we can have people together on both sides is because Cheryl was so effective at having those conversations and connecting those people. And I so appreciate her for that. I so thank Lana for sharing that story with me so that I could share it with you. Would any of the rest of you like to offer some thoughts?
I'll go next. I'm Carrie Altenburn. I'm on the board of the Blackjack Battlefield Trust, among other things. And I don't remember exactly when I met Cheryl. I go back to the 2003 when it was just started talking about the Bleeding Kansas heritage area. And I'm sure that's about the time I met her, because she's been involved with the heritage area since pretty much the beginning. And working with her with the heritage area was pretty much my only interaction with her, but it was a significant interaction. Going to partner meetings, and they used to be monthly, and they were all over the place. And I don't think she missed very many of them. And she was always a smiling face and a pleasant person. And you got to talking to her, and you just were going, this person knows an awful lot about a lot of things. And I can't say how, I can't pin down this was, I did this because of Cheryl or that because of Cheryl, but I know her influence had a lot to do with what was going on. She never seemed to be down about anything. And that's important in an organization that was, fledgling. And that was back before the Missourians were in. And yes, when the Missourians came, when the Missourians were sort of dumped on us, at least that's the way we felt. It was strained for a while, but a few people, Cheryl included, crossed those boundaries and got rid of that boundary. And I like to think the heritage area has no border. The borders of the heritage area go around the outside of it. It's just two sides of the same coin. And I know how instrumental she was in bringing that about. And I don't know how we're going to get along without her. She just, as I said, she was always there. And the STEPS program, she was a strong proponent of that, always helping people, offering to help, because it's not an easy process by any means. I know that because we're nowhere near done yet. And we've been on it for, I don't know, 5-6 years now. And she was always a cheerleader for it, because she understood how important it was to get all of your ducks in a row in order to move on into the future. So so I'm glad to get this opportunity to talk about her, and to hope that her legacy continues on a heritage area far into the future.
Certainly true, Carrie. Certainly true. I guess back in those initial phases of the heritage area, when it was Bleeding Kansas, you had your own little squabbles between the good folks who called Manhattan home and those who called Lawrence home, and you managed to heal that divide. It really set you up nicely for the Missourians, didn't it?
Yes, it did. And it was a healing process, not just with Manhattan, but into Missouri. I mean, the people were on the opposite sides for not for that long. That was it. It didn't take long after Cheryl and other folks started reaching out across the border for people to start realizing that the story we were telling was incomplete without the Missouri story. And that, Bleeding Kansas Heritage Area was not what it should be. It was Freedom's Frontier National, and then it became National Heritage Area. And as we just went from there, but it wouldn't have happened without healing that, because that incident, that process could have been disastrous. And it turned out to be the absolute best thing that could ever have happened for the heritage area. The
Amen.
absolute best.
Amen. Thank you, Carrie. Would anyone else like to offer their thoughts?
Jim,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, Steve, we can. Go right ahead.
My name is Steve Collins, and I've worked off and on at Quindaro Ruins, and I helped stabilize them in 2006. But I believe that I met Cheryl for the first time in 1998 at one of the meetings of the Territorial Kansas Heritage Alliance that Carrie's already talked about. And I'm probably unusual in this group in that I didn't ever directly work with Cheryl. I wasn't on a committee with her, and I unfortunately I just didn't ever have that interaction with her. But I did notice, along with Carrie, that she was always at those Territorial Kansas Heritage Alliance meetings. I mean, and always was a go-to person. And the last thing I would say about Cheryl is that she was shy. I mean, she was just always available. And I think everyone else has touched on those characteristics of Cheryl that made her so accessible and certainly brought people together. And I liked her, and her presence was always one of energy. So although I never worked directly with her, we were on the same team in the Territorial Kansas Heritage Alliance, and the state of Kansas and history in Kansas owes Cheryl a great debt, and we will very much miss her.
Thank you, Steve. Those are excellent words and an excellent perspective. Thank you for sharing that. It really is important how people set a tone along the way, and Cheryl set a tone. Who else would like to offer their thoughts?
Jim, I guess I'll jump in.
Thank you, Michael.
Michael Stubbs, I guess, as like with Carrie, one of the hats, the Mount Mitchell Heritage Prairie Park in Waubonsee County. I too met Cheryl in about 1998, at the same time Steve was talking about. And, all these years, Cheryl's just been this incredible stabilizing presence. I didn't think I would choke up. I haven't even said anything yet.
It's quite all right, Michael. It's quite all right.
It's just really hard to believe that she's gone.
It certainly is.
Anyway, everything that everybody said is totally true. The heritage area wouldn't be what it is today if her influence hadn't been there since day. I mean, I remember day one. I mean, 1998 was pretty early. I can remember sitting in conference rooms at the tourism office. I should probably just hang it up.
Michael, thank you. We know how hard this is for those of you who have had such a wonderful relationship with Cheryl over the years. I have only known Cheryl for the last 6 years that I've been part of the Freedom's Frontier family. And she was one of the first people I was counseled to give a call to. And she made me feel so welcome. Now, I didn't know anything about her background or anything other than she was the executive director of the Raleigh County Historical Society. But her capability for making you feel welcome, and then her capability to both make good suggestions to you and mentor you, meant the world to me. And it's such a hard thing to express, particularly when someone's taken suddenly from us, because we never got the chance to say those things out loud to the extent they are deserved to be spoken. And Cheryl, I hope she hears those words and those prayers that mean so much along the way. Who else would like to share about their time and relationship with Cheryl?
Well, if you don't mind, I'd be very glad to say a few things too. I'm Lana Parker, and I'm with the Riley County Historical Museum. And I cannot express enough how truly privileged I feel to have had a supervisor, a boss, a mentor like Cheryl, almost going on 10 years. So I'll never forget the first time talking with her for the interview. And as you mentioned, Jim, she had the ability to just make you feel so comfortable and welcome in her warmth. My goodness, what a historian. Her professionalism, everything she did, she set the bar high and wanted you to join her in that. And the manner in which she did that was just full of grace. She always did things with just grace, and you admire her for that. One of my favorite things when people would come through the door here at the museum, she always greeted them with enthusiasm, excitement. And as Marcia said, she always talked about the threads and the connections. And I don't know how many times somebody would come through the door and it turns out they're her cousin in some way. And that was a lot of fun. She always, oh, I'm related to them through da-da-da. And that was just so fun because she genuinely cared about those stories. And she loved Freedom's Frontier. And that was the one thing too. And you have all emphasized that the collaboration. She was always emphasizing collaboration. And even across the border in Missouri, there's no question there. And I like, Carrie, what you said, there's no border there. It was, she wanted to find those shared connections and stories, and she did. So it's been really hard without her. And we feel a very big hole in our hearts here in Riley County, but there's no question that she is here. My gosh, you still expect her to walk through the door at any moment. And she'll always be a part, everybody here. My gosh, it's just incredible to hear your memories and stories and how much she impacted you. And what a blessing to have somebody like that in our lives. So, and I'm sorry.
No. No need to apologize. I think you're feeling obviously what all of us who've had the privilege of working with Cheryl, we may be a bit envious because you got to work with her all the time.
Incredible.
What an incredible gift that is. I have not.
Oh,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Jim.
Go, please.
You know, the nice thing about collaborative efforts is that we are here for each other too. So we know how wonderful Cheryl's legacy will continue. And by sharing the stories and the memories, the grief is tough. But like Jim said, I think it helps us keep her legacy going. And don't hesitate, Alana, to reach out because we are here. And history is about humans. And I think Cheryl would be very pleased with how things have progressed. And I have full confidence that we will continue that too, because that's what connections are for. And I just remember thankfully I was able to attend the funeral, and the Methodist pastor had such an eloquent way of speaking to her skills and her impacts on the community. And I think Marcia or Lana, I was telling you this, but it was kind of like, you're always going to have in the back of your mind, what would Cheryl do? And I think a lot of us are going to be thinking that, especially over the next couple of times we do get together, because she is that steady hand. And she just had such an eloquent way of uplifting and supporting, no matter what organization you're in, or if this was your first meeting of Freedom's Frontier, she was just happy to see you.
Mhm.
And if this was a meeting that you'd been to, you always learn something from her.
Mhm.
And that's the great thing about what we do in history and humanities. It's always a learning process. And Michael, it's great to see you. I haven't seen you in so long, and I always learn everything. That's the great thing about Freedom's Frontier, is just going to the different places and learning about that place. And that's what Freedom's Frontier always had the upper hand, is that we didn't have a physical feature like a canal or buildings. We have stories, and it's just not stories from the border war period. It's how people can connect them to understanding the complexities of today's times. And I think a lot of us do those connections, but Cheryl just had a way of bringing those out, to emulating how we can continue those and do those new discoveries. And yeah, agree. It's hard. It really is. And I know we will continue just what she wanted, not only Freedom's Frontier, but, Riley County to do. I know she was very instrumental with the Flint Hills Discovery Center and keeping all of the Manhattan cultural organizations together. And a lot of that will continue. And that's what we are as a community, very much so.
Well said. And Alana, I just want to say, I think this moment, this time, is really a gift to her husband and her son and her daughter-in-law and her granddaughter, right? Because we knew Cheryl in a different way than they did, right? And it's just like, if any of us, people wonder what we do, well, we knew what Cheryl did. And so, Michael, I'm going to encourage you to speak up, even with tears, because it's a gift to her family to know what she did.
It was in the little things she did. Anytime she'd come by and ask you, how's your family doing? Or she genuinely cared. And I know with each of you, there's no doubt she did that with each of you at some or many points. And she listened, because she would come back the next week and she would follow up on that. So her genuine care for people, and that also spoke to with the history. It's just, she had that love for people, for history and stories. And that's, it shows with how your stories that you have all shared. And like I said, my goodness, what a privilege to know somebody like Cheryl.
Amen. Amen. Would anyone else like to add any other thoughts before we conclude these warm memories?
Virtual hugs for all. That's the only bad thing.
I don't think they've figured out in Zoom a reaction that looks like a hug. I think you can only do applause, and certainly Cheryl is deserving of that applause along the way. I truly appreciate all of you making time today to share these thoughts. And as I wrap this up, just remind you, we don't know how long we have. So it's so very important that those we appreciate, we tell them so. And never miss that opportunity. And I felt so bad that I never had that chance of expressing how much Cheryl meant to me in my job along the way, and just would urge all of you to cherish the people who mean the most to you. And I so greatly appreciate that you've been able to join this remembrance today. God bless you and thank you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. It's good to see everyone.
Thank you all. Take care.